What's going on, guys? Arekkz here. Welcome back to another video for Marvel's Avengers, and today I want to talk about the upcoming beta. The footage you're seeing in the background is just some B-roll that Square Enix very kindly provided, but this past weekend I actually had a chance to go hands-on with an early access window for the beta, test out all the content, basically play through what will be available this weekend, and I also got to record some gameplay, which I can share with you towards the end of the week. So today I figured I just want to kind of talk about it, talk about some of the activities, talk about some of my initial impressions, initial thoughts, things that I enjoyed, things that I would like to see them address ideally before launch, and just try and sort of paint a picture as to what you can expect if you're going to be diving in. Of course, this weekend's beta is a pre-order beta, but if you guys are going to be jumping in, then this can kind of paint a picture as to what's available. So if you guys do enjoy this, you do find this helpful, then a like would be super appreciated. Drop any questions you have in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. But top level, what exactly do you get to do in this beta? Well, the very first thing is you get to run through that kind of typical A-Day mission, the one that we saw at the very beginning. So you get to run down the bridge, basically kind of play as all the different heroes, but then it jumps forward to effectively the kind of more open aspects of the game, kind of running through some, more structured missions and taking control of certain characters. There are only 4 playable characters in the beta for now, and that is Iron Man, Hulk, Black Widow, and Miss Marvel. So unfortunately, as a Thor fanboy, I didn't get to play as Thor. I mean, you get to play as him on the bridge, you get to try him out, you also get to try out Captain America, but for the majority of the beta, once you get past that first mission, you can only play as those 4 characters. You of course then get to explore some different missions, you get to wander around your carrier, you get to do some of the hero missions, which are the single player missions, the kind of more narrative driven, like heavy story focused missions that tell stories around select characters. There are also 3 harm room missions, which are basically the augmented reality training rooms where you can kind of go in and test out your moves and fight loads of waves of enemies. You can do those multiplayer. There are Warzone missions, there are Drop Zone missions, all of which can be done multiplayer. So for the most part, the majority of the beta can be played either in multiplayer, or you can play them with AI teammates, and of course you can just do stuff on your own. So there's quite a bit of stuff to kind of jump into, and in terms of progression, you get to go as far as level 15 and power level 45. So when we were playing through, the gear that we saw drop typically fell between green, blue, and purple items. I didn't see any kind of legendary items dropping. You can of course boost your power on your gear by, using the kind of consumable items you accrue as you play throughout the game. So you can eventually get to the point where you have max power, max level as far as the beta is concerned. And when it comes to skill trees, you then have 1 page right now. We have seen, of course, in some of the preview footage, each character has 3 different pages. So we have, in that respect, only just begun to scratch the surface. But within that, you get to spend quite a few skill points. You won't have enough to unlock everything, but you will, of course, be able to go through and, experiment with some different things, mess around with some moves. And that is basically exactly what we did. Now, in our playtime, it's myself, TwoSixNine, Paradise Central, and Vestmore. I played as Hulk. 26 played as Miss Marvel, Paradise played as Iron Man, and Vestmore played as Black Widow, and we had a lot of fun. Like, initially, if you are a fan of the Avengers, if you're a fan of Marvel, and you kind of just like playing as those heroes, then definitely running through as a squad, kind of taking enemies down together, using your combos, all of that stuff is a lot of fun in combat in kind of these sort of condensed short moments. Missions themselves are not too long. Keep in mind, this is not an open world game. You select missions, you drop in, you load in, you then run through missions, which depending on their complexity some of them can be quite short. You might run in and run out and have them done in like 10 minutes. Other ones might take a little bit longer. So, in that respect, it is quite a sort of condensed, bite-sized experience. But when you are in the thick of battle, when you've got all your combos going off, when you're picking up enemies like a Hulk, like picking up massive rocks, throwing them at people, grabbing enemies, swinging them around, seeing Iron Man fly over your head, seeing Miss Marvel just like slam someone with like a massive fist, it's actually really cool. I will say, there are a few things that I do really want to see Crystal Dynamics and obviously Square Enix as well kind of hopefully address ahead of launch. One tip I will give you guys when you jump into the beta, make sure you select the performance mode when you first start. By default, the game loads you into the 4K mode, which, to be completely honest with you guys, has quite a few frame rate issues. Hopefully, again, this is something that they can fix ahead of launch. But playing in the 4K mode by default, it kind of didn't necessarily sort of say, hey, you can swap to the performance mode. So I ran through initially and, at times it runs super smoothly. Other times there are definite frame rate drops. However, switching over to performance mode did remove most of those, and then the experience just became so much smoother. Because this is definitely one of those ones where there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of kind of chaos. There's lots of enemies, lots of particle effects, lots of things just happening on screen. So if you're not playing in performance mode, it is quite prone to, some of those frame rate drops. So I would highly recommend running through that. Now, on top of that, it's also worth noting the beta is obviously going to give you a good idea as to how the game physically plays, but at this stage, I still don't really have a clear picture as to the wider game. What I mean by that is, We understand that structurally, you have things like Warzone missions, you have hero missions, you have all these different bite-sized missions, but because there were only a few to choose from in the game, we spent a lot of time revisiting similar environments, places we've been before. So, amidst all of those 4 or 5 drop zone missions and Warzone missions, we kind of went back to locations we've been to before. So there was quite a lot of kind of repeat environment. Now, obviously, if you've seen some of the trailers, we know the missions do span the world. We know there are different areas. We know there's cities. We know there's snowy tundras. That stuff we didn't get to experience ourselves in game. So for the beta purposes, there were some of the activities that were a little bit repetitive, especially if you decide to go back and farm gear. I mean, obviously that's part of the reason. You play this game, it's a loot-driven game, so part of the reason is to kind of chase after that loot. But some of those activities definitely did feel quite repetitive, but I feel like it's one of those ones where, once you have the character you like, once you're investing in the character you like, and once we have a better idea as to what other missions we have available, and of course the the wider environmental biomes, that should hopefully at least mix up the kind of monotony ever so slightly. Now, I mentioned before, obviously this is a loot-driven game. I will say loot in this game, at least kind of from what I've got to test so far, is definitely a lot more passive. There are definitely some really cool things. Obviously, you can imbue some of your attacks with elemental effects. Having pin particles and stuff is just hilarious because suddenly your enemies will shrink. But I will say that from the pieces that I collected, and again, keep in mind, we have barely scratched the surface. I'm talking about this from a beta, from a limited number of activities, limited number of gear, but I didn't get any kind of gear pieces that felt like they drastically change the way that I play. Like, they would complement my playstyle, they would add additional things for me to kind of, factor into my build, but I will say they didn't necessarily seem to be as, as heavily kind of game-changing as I might have thought. But again, that could well change a little bit later on. In terms of the skill tree, there's of course a lot of the fun things to kind of mess around with. There don't appear to be swappable abilities just yet, but instead what you do is you spec into the skill tree, and depending on where you go, it adds additional combo chains or additional abilities and kind of options to your core move. So take someone like Hulk, you have the ability to grab an enemy, but if you spec on the skill tree, you can grab 2 of them, you can swing them around, you can slam them together. So it seems like the skill tree focus in this game is more so building on your core abilities. I do hope there are some abilities we can kind of swap to, because otherwise that will also be a little bit repetitive, because it's basically going to mean that every character will have the core primary abilities, and then your differentiating factor will be where you spec down the tree. So I'm hoping, once they give us access to, say, the second and third trees, there are actual abilities we can swap out and change, because that's one of those things that in a game like this is kind of really important. So I do hope to see that as well. But what I will say is, top level right now, I did still enjoy my time. I honestly think this is a game that shines playing with your friends. I haven't really played this solo other than doing like the hero missions, and while it is obviously still fun, this kind of level of enjoyment is the same kind of enjoyment that I got from something like Marvel Ultimate Alliance, where, you kind of look at the game initially and you might not necessarily know what it has to offer, but when you play it with friends, it's just a lot of fun. You pick your favourite heroes, you run through, you cause some mayhem. That's the kind of enjoyment I get. I feel like on the loot front, it's going to give you that sort of like loot fix, but not necessarily as deep as, say, other loot-driven games. So don't necessarily look at this as, say, a super deep loot-heavy game. More so one of those games that offers that experience in a much more bite-sized package, which I guess is really good, because if you don't necessarily have the time to sink into one of those heavy investment loot games that literally requires you to run it like a full-time job, and you just want something you can jump into for, say, 20 minutes, an hour, half an hour, run these kind of like missions back to back, then it will definitely give you that fix. But I think it's important to go into it with the right mindset. Either way, for the time being, that's pretty much it. Initial impressions, I enjoyed what I played. There are definitely some things that I think they need to address, that I think they need to fix, and hopefully if they can do that, then it'll be an enjoyable experience come launch next month. If you guys want to see more from the game, then of course stick around to the end of the week, because I'll be uploading my gameplay, showing you some stuff from all different characters, and of course keep it locked for plenty more. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Arekkz Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there. If you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with, it's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.